Hello, this is Jay Frost speaking to you from Frontlines of Social Good, the weekly news and views program from the Philanthropy Mastermind series. It's good to see you again after our short break. We begin, as always, with the top 5 gifts of the week and a look at the headlines shaping the philanthropic landscape. Then we'll hear from Zoe Amar, one of the UK's leading digital and AI experts, on how artificial intelligence is reshaping communications and why some charities risk being cut out of the content stream altogether. Then, in our author's corner, Tammy Zonker joins us to talk about her new book, Calling All Heroes, and the call she's issuing to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders to step forward with courage and clarity in this moment. Let's get started. First, the top 5 gifts of the week, counting down as we usually do from the smallest to the largest. At number 5, the Gatton Foundation has committed $11 million to the Kentucky FFA Foundation. The gift will strengthen the agricultural education and leadership development, funding scholarships and expanding programs that support young people across the state. Number 4 goes to Vanderbilt University, which is receiving $16.5 million from the Clark Foundation. The money will establish the Clark Scholars Program, offering scholarships and mentoring to first-generation and underrepresented students in STEM fields. At number 3, the National Breast Cancer Foundation of Australia has announced a $25 million research grant through the Federal Medical Research Future Fund. This historic investment will support a 10-year effort to halve breast cancer deaths by 2030 through earlier detection and improved treatment. Number 2 is a gift of $30 million to the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston. The anonymous donation will fund a new cardiovascular institute, advancing research in patient care and heart health for years to come. And finally, at number 1, Tom Golisano has pledged $50 million to the Children's Hospital in Buffalo, which will now be renamed the Golisano Children's Hospital of Buffalo. The transformational gift will expand specialized pediatric services and ensure that children across Western New York receive comprehensive care. Have we missed a big gift announcement this week? We most certainly have, I'm sure. Please let us know about the gifts that you know in your community by contacting me directly through LinkedIn or by email at j@donorsearch.net. Now in the news this week, the nonprofit sector is confronting both turbulence and transformation. First, an update on public media, which of course is in crisis after the Corporation for Public Broadcasting lost more than $1 billion in federal support and is now slated to close at the end of September. That decision has frozen millions in grant funding for the next generation warning system, leaving local stations unable to modernize their emergency alert infrastructure. The Public Media Bridge Fund has stepped in with a $100 million campaign to stabilize the system, backed by a $26.5 million gift from the Knight and MacArthur Foundations. But without further help, many newsrooms and vital emergency services could disappear. Meanwhile, in Chicago, a federal court has upheld Illinois' landmark law requiring nonprofits to report aggregate demographic data on their leadership. The ruling rejected challenges brought by the Trump administration and Edward Blum's American Alliance for Equal Rights, allowing the state's transparency measure, signed in 2024, to move forward. And as organizations navigate these challenges, they are also being called on to harness new tools to amplify their work. That's the focus of the upcoming Fundraising.ai Global Summit, its 3rd annual summit, which will be held on September 15th and 16th, a free, all-virtual gathering with more than 40 sessions on ethical, human-centered uses of AI in fundraising and nonprofit management. And that brings us to today's first conversation. Zoe Amar is widely recognized as one of the UK's leading voices on digital transformation and AI in the charity sector. She's the founder of Zoe Amar Digital, the chair of the Digital Code of Practice and co-chair of the Charity AI Task Force. Today, she joins us to talk about her latest article on how AI may be cutting charities out of the content stream altogether. and what organizations can do to ensure their voices are not only heard, but trusted in this new era. Here is that conversation. We apologize for the delay, folks. We'll have that for you in just a moment. Stay tuned. Begin by saying thank you very much for taking time to talk today. It's really a pleasure to meet you and also to hear a little bit more about what you have just written. And for context, you posted something on LinkedIn recently and then directed our attention to a piece that you published in Third Sector, a magazine that or a publication that many people in the US really should read. And it's all about disintermediation, which is a lot of syllables. Help us understand what that means, particularly what it means to us in the third sector or the nonprofit sector, as we typically call it here.
Absolutely. So disintermediation in the broadest sense essentially means being cut out of the journey between someone wanting something and the source of information and advice. And the piece that I wrote for Third Sector was about some slightly worrying developments, in fact, very worrying developments that we have seen in the UK, which means that charities are not as visible as they once were on Google. So to give you an example of that, for example, a cancer patient might go to Google and ask about some treatment options, and then they would see an AI search summary, which many of us also have seen in our search results. And then they would look at what's come up in that search summary, and speaking to people from health charities in the UK, where they're getting really worried is that, for example, it will include things like sources from Reddit or Quora, forums where the information is not verified. And equally, it will also include some sources of information that might come from other countries. And we all know that in different countries, there are different types of treatment for different illnesses. And that's just one example of how this is playing out. And if you think about the fact that more and more of us are also searching for information within AI search tools, so that same cancer patient might go on to ChatGPT, or they might go to Copilot or Claude or Gemini, and they might say, look, I'm in this situation, I've been diagnosed with this type of cancer, I've been offered these options by doctors, what do I do? Can you evaluate them for me? So there's something about the information that's getting served and curated to people by AI, and also how they're seeking information. And both of those things are having really worrying consequences for the charities that I spoke to in the UK. So for many of them, I was hearing that web traffic is down by 30%. in some cases, which is a real concern. And the consequence of that are really that people aren't getting to trusted sources of information. And we all know that charities have built up that expertise and that fantastic information advice, often over decades of really deep research and incredible work. So that means that information advice is not getting the people who need it. What I also heard from the charities I spoke to is that calls to helplines are down as well. And it also means, most crucially for your audience today in many ways, is that it's much harder to start to acquire donors and to acquire supporters, because if people are not going near your website, it essentially means that you can't get them into that donor journey. You can't engage them with your cause. So everything we know about donor journeys, supporter journeys, beneficiary journeys is changing. And we need to acknowledge that as a sector and look at what we can do about it together.
How did you make this discovery for yourself?
So this is a really good question. So you may know, because I know we've been talking for a while, that I've been doing a lot of work in AI. So my consultancy focuses on AI and digital transformation. And over the last year, I've started hearing whispers about this from various charities. You know, people saying we're really worried that our information isn't getting to patients or to survivors of domestic violence or young people with mental health. So I was starting to hear all these concerns coming from charities, especially in the context of web traffic being down. And those of us who work in digital will have heard about elements of our digital journeys kind of needing fixing. And I naively thought, well, actually, maybe this is something that can be changed, that is within charities' gift. But when I spoke to amazing charities like NSPCC, for example, who are quoted in my piece, or the Patient Information Forum, who represent charities who work with patients, such as Macmillan and Marie Curie, I realised that this isn't just to do with one part of the donor journey or the supporter journey breaking. It's to do with a fundamental shift in the model of how people interact with charity services and information, how they donate to them has changed. It has broken, because if people aren't going towards charities' websites and they're not engaging with them in this zero-click way that I mentioned in this piece, so we know that only 1 in 10 people actually click through from AI summaries. That means we need to think much more differently as a sector about how we actually get to those people. So our jobs as fundraisers, as charities, have just got a lot more challenging.
As you describe this, I'm thinking about the way people have approached SEO or search engine optimization. And for people on that front in the charity sector, they might be familiar with doing all these things from keywords, et cetera, to generate more traffic to their websites in order to accomplish those goals, to have people look at their content, seek a benefit from the information they offer, and hopefully then to be attracted as potential supporters. Um, and there are ways that people have been able to engineer more successful search engine optimization for websites. What you seem to be saying is there's not much of a lever that we have in that same way for these AI summaries. Is that correct? And do you see any kind of remedies for any of us in the charity sector or broadly, the entire information economy, to try and make sure that these summaries, because they're not going away, right? That these summaries will be an avenue for us to ensure that the information is both better, but also that they are passed through to organizations that are aligned with what the user actually wants to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the good news is that if your charity is good at SEO and you've been working hard on it, that will help in these instances. It's not going to solve the problem completely, but it will help. So in my piece in Third Sector, I talked to 2 amazing digital marketing specialists, Lou Barton and also Dominika Czakova from Manifesto, a digital agency in the UK. And my understanding from speaking to them is that if your charity has been doing the hard yards on SEO, so making your content easy to find, then therefore it makes it easier for AI tools to find you. However, what you also need to be aware of, from that fantastic advice from Manifesto, is that the tools are going to be looking at all the other places that you're mentioned as well. So if you're getting mentioned a lot on other people's websites, on social media and in press, that's really good, because it means that you're much more likely to be found by ChatGPT or Copilot or these other tools as well. So I wonder whether that's going to help us as a sector, because all the good charities that I know have really good word of mouth and lots of mentions by other by other websites across social, because they're so good at what they do. So I think if you've got those things in your favour, that's going to help you be found more easily by these tools. But nevertheless, it is a really significant challenge, because it is to do with that shift in behaviour in terms of how beneficiaries and also donors and supporters are looking for information, and also what they value when they get that information. Because really, with an AI search summary, the whole purpose of it is to serve you this very nice looking curated list of these sources with speed and polish. Whereas actually, if we think about the old days when we all started to search for things online, it was really about knowing what the problem was you were trying to solve and seeking out the answers. So it is a real shift in behaviour. And one of the things that Lou and Dominica mentioned in my piece, which I thought was really, really helpful, was the best way to understand how donors' behaviour is changing is to talk to them. So go back, look at these donor journeys and ask people what they're looking for at each stage, what they're searching for, where they're searching for it. And once you start to get a handle on how those donors' behaviour is changing, then you can start to think, well, how do these journeys need to look different? How can I meet people where they are? And it is very much going to be a case of meeting people where they are, rather than perhaps the more conventional donor journeys we've all been used to with our websites, i.e. build it and they will come if we can get them there.
As you're discussing this, it does occur to me that one of the difficulties is knowing how to talk to people, that a lot of this environment has changed, and it's possible, of course, to set up a simple digital survey for people who actually do visit the website or who have been donors before. Whether or not they will respond, I guess, is something we could discuss for hours, but how to make those effective. But that is a channel we have. But for people who haven't yet visited our sites or discussed something with our charities, how can we survey them? Or what are some of the practical approaches that you've taken away as you think about ways to ensure that we are availing ourselves of the opportunity to listen to people and find out what they are doing, not only to help ourselves do our job better within the charity sector, but also to help them, because we're all learning this at lightning speed, and they're using AI for the first time, just like we are with these profiles.
So this is such a brilliant question, because in all the work that we do, and I'd be interested to know if this happens in work you're doing in fundraising with your colleagues, so often we all focus on our warm audiences, don't we? Because we know they're much more likely to give more and give again. And I totally get that as a key fundraising principle. What you've just alluded to there is that understanding the changing needs and the new behaviours of our cold audiences is fundamentally vital to understanding the new space that we all find ourselves in now. So I'd say you're going to have to really look at how you can get to that cold audience. So how we've done it with organisations we've worked with is you might want to incentivize them. So to look at whether you can give them vouchers or something like that to get involved in user testing. You might have to involve some kind of third party, so maybe another organisation that works with that group really closely. You might just have to get creative about which channels you use to reach those groups that historically you may not have a relationship with. But I think we are all going to need to talk to those colder audiences now, because that could well be the key to unlocking and understanding these new behaviours. Because if people are coming to your website or your social every day anyway, we know how they're behaving because it's habit. And sure, their behaviour will change, but they are fans of yours already. We need to understand how we get the attention and get the engagement from people who may not even come to your website.
I'm wondering if you're experiencing there, as we are here, this kind of decline in the potential donor audience, especially among younger donors, however you define that term, that people aren't necessarily finding the charities as their partners and addressing the interests the mutual interests we have, and how you imagine this whole discussion about disintermediation is making this more complicated, and with the avenues that we need to find, especially again for donors who are now growing up in an environment that has been disintermediated. What are some of the things that you're thinking about for business generally, for charities specifically, to ensure that we are engaging with people who are now growing up just using AI, and they don't necessarily think about I can't even think of it like the Royal National Lifeboat right away, even though someday when they're in the water, they're really going to appreciate having them there.
Yeah, well, this is a huge question for the charity sector, isn't it? And in fact, I spoke at an event a few weeks back with an amazing agency on the UK side everyone should check out, called Torchbox, who ran a breakfast of fundraising leaders, which is about how do we get to that young audience. So you're exactly right. There are these real challenges, aren't there? We're talking about an AI native audience. I mean, if I talk to my 12-year-old daughter, she's been telling me that she talks to AI within WhatsApp, for example, all the time. I think there's an even bigger question as well there. I mean, when I talk to her and my 14-year-old son, even though I obviously have worked in the charity sector for a really long time now, they ask questions about what a charity does and why would they donate to a charity rather than, say, another organisation that's doing good in the world, or give by another means such as crowdfunding. So even if they, who are very close to charity, are asking questions about the relevance of charity and what charity does, and if it's the right kind of organisation for them to engage with, then there's an even bigger piece of work, I'd say, about how do we help those younger generations understand what charity does and why it matters, and also how it's going to help them as well. So again, I would say the number one thing is to talk to that group. So go out and talk to young people, find out how they're using AI, what their hopes and fears for it are, and how they are using it in order to seek information, how it might be influencing their decisions to donate, for example, or even to buy online as well, which, talking to my children, they were incredibly, perhaps if not too, comfortable with. So again, it's understanding that shift in behaviour for this new generation that's coming into the world of donations.
What's the most surprising thing about all of this for you at this point?
This is a great question. The thing that is surprising me and worrying me the most is that I don't think this is just about a route to information and donating, disruptive and worrying though that is. I think there's also a secondary worry, which I outline in the piece, which is that trust and the value of the incredible information and advice that we offer in the sector is being eroded. So one of the scary things that I found out when I was researching this piece is that calls to helplines are down as well. And if people don't get the value of contacting a charity, which is often are specialists in the areas that they look after, the causes that they tend to, then that is a real existential threat, and that worries me.
I know you do a lot of work, and you have a podcast. You issued, I think, a report just a month ago that is going to be very valuable for our listeners to know about. How can people learn more about the scope of your work and follow some of that content?
Sure, yes. So if people come to our website, if they can find it, zoeamar.com, you can find out more about our work as a digital and AI consultancy. And you can also find links to the digital skills report and the other work that we do. And I'm also on LinkedIn as Zoe Amar if anyone would like to connect.
And your podcast?
Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you for prompting me. So it's called Start to the Top. It's all about what leaders need to do today, the skills they need to develop to prepare for the world of tomorrow. So AI is obviously a really big part of that. Again, you can find that on our website, or if you just look for Starts at the Top podcast, and that will take you to our site. And we're on all the all the major podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you so much for all this, Zoe. Really do appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, Jay. Thank you for having me.
And again, that was Zoe Amar with the really an eye-opening look at how artificial intelligence is reshaping the way that charities communicate with the public, as well as what the public sees of what you do and what's at stake if we are left behind. Our next guest is going to pick up on that theme of change, but in a very different way, and that's Tammy Zonker. Tammy has spent her career helping organizations raise the resources they need, and now she's calling on all of us in the sector to lead with courage. She has a new book, Calling All Heroes, which is both a rallying cry and a practical guide for fundraisers facing today's challenges. I spoke with Tammy about this new book, which is coming out in November. And here is that conversation. Tammy, thank you so much for being willing to talk about your forthcoming book, Calling All Heroes. I'm really excited to hear more about this. So, first of all, when does it come out?
Oh, well, first, Jay, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. The new book, Calling All Heroes, will be shipping in November, late November, possibly early, but for sure by late November.
Now, since I haven't read it yet, because no one's read it yet, except I guess a few close friends, I don't know how you write. You'll have to give me kind of a little guided tour about what you're talking about here. What inspired the book? Let's start there.
Oh, yes. So, like we talk with a lot of nonprofit professionals, a lot of fundraisers, CEOs, executive directors, and what I have encountered is they feel very torn. Like we have had this practice of donor-centered fundraising, and we've raised a lot of money with that approach, with that methodology. And yet, when the unintended consequences that sometimes arise out of power dynamics, like there's a shadow side to that, right? So there's the plus side of donor-centered fundraising, and then there's the shadow side where sometimes we don't push back, we don't course correct when a donor wants to take us off mission, a bit of mission creep, or the power dynamics ensue, and we allow them to continue buying into stereotypes and belief systems that aren't accurate or helpful, and certainly not respectful to the communities that we serve. And then the flip side is there are a lot of people who are champions for community-centered fundraising, which I wholeheartedly believe in, right? It's deeply rooted in justice and equity. I mean, from my point of view, what is not to agree with there? And yet, there's a big challenge in terms of what are the specific steps to implementing it? And does it indeed raise as much money? Like some donors are resisting community-centered fundraising. Some board members have concerns about community-centered fundraising. So how do we bridge this divide? That was the inspiration. And in fact, as we said at the top of our conversation, the book is titled Calling All Heroes, but the rest of that title is Combining the Best of Donor-Centered and Community-Centered Fundraising for Greater Impact. So essentially, the inspiration for the book was to find unity and to create a human-centered approach to fundraising so that we can just get back to making a difference in our communities collectively in unison.
So, who are the heroes in this story?
Yes, everyone's a hero. I believe the donors are the heroes. I believe our volunteers are heroes, our staff are heroes, our community leaders and advocates are heroes, and certainly the people who participate in our programs, who, whether they are pursuing higher education and looking for, scholarships and in need of support so that they can realize their dreams and become the amazing people they were born to be, or whether they are patients who are fighting for their lives, or whether it's, you know, a working mom with small children, and maybe those children have mental health or behavioral health disorders, which are so commonplace. So, from my view, the heroes are really all of us. And just like, you know, the League of Heroes, just like the movies show us, that heroes are at their best when they work together, when they combine their powers, their lived experiences, their unique gifts and talents to work together to achieve something greater. And that essentially is what this book is about.
Almost by implication there, especially when you mentioned Justice League, I start
Yes.
thinking about the battle of some of these people. You know, I'm not talking about the villains in these stories, but rather sometimes a conflict between the heroes. Do you
Yes,
see that happening?
absolutely. I mean, there's a natural tension in all relationships, and especially when the relationships are coming together with high stakes. And you know, the issues that we as a community are facing are high stakes. And so, because we have different lived experiences and different points of view, which by the way is a superpower, there is a natural tension. And so, just like when we look at Justice League, it is about like how we resolve those tensions is listening, empathy, trying to like come together. And sometimes it does take difficult, courageous conversations to find the unity to move forward together. So, absolutely, Jay, there's a natural tension, as it should be.
It does seem like this is a time where things are really fraught. I mean, we've looked at the major changes in government funding and government attitudes towards the sector. And I'm
Yes.
wondering, that may not have been a driver for the book because I'm sure you've been working on the book for a bit, but it does come in that climate. It's being released in that climate. What do you imagine people will be able to take away from the experience of thinking about this in a more I don't know, broader, deeper way,
Mm.
especially now when you mention things like on the community center fundraising side, we're talking about equity. And on the donor centered side, we're talking about fostering conversations with people that are intimate and real and authentic. Both of those have challenges in the present environment. So, what do you imagine it's going to be like for people opening this book in November, December, January, especially a new election year for that matter, and trying to apply those lessons in an environment which is quite different to the one we had just a year or two ago?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I think it's very timely. I mean, for us to be able to move through these uncertain times, these very polarizing times, I truly believe we've got to come together. And even if we don't agree on everything, which we won't, if we can find our center in shared beliefs and values, that's the place to focus. And I think about James Baldwin's, he had many amazing quotes, but the one that touches me, and I hope I get it right, but you'll get the essence of it. And his quote was, he said, "We can disagree and still love each other as long as your disagreement is not rooted in my oppression and denial of my right to exist." And so I believe that if we can come together in our shared beliefs and values, we can find a way through by having courageous conversations, by being respectful, by being open and empathetic, and really trying to understand the variety of perspectives and lived experiences, and really to understand more deeply the root causes of the challenges that we face. And if, as Baldwin said, if someone is not in alignment with that, if it is, our disagreement is rooted in oppression or denial of my existence, then they're not your people.
Now, for a person picking up the book the first time, can you take us on kind of a guided tour of because I don't know if this book will be something like the fundraising manual or if it's kind of a guided tour through that conversation. How do you build the architecture of the narrative of the book?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. So it is designed as a hands-on playbook. So we begin by setting the context. How did we get to where we are? Initially, there was organizational centered messaging and fundraising, right? We do this and we do that. Aren't we great? Please give us money. And then, of course, brilliant Ken Burnett, one of our mutual friends, Ken introduced relationship fundraising, which is very akin to what came next, Penelope Burke's donor-centered fundraising, and then, of course, the evolution of community-centered fundraising. And all of these had pros and cons, strengths and shadow sides. And so we kind of walk through that journey. And rather than saying either or, my approach is understand them and create a yes and. Like, let's take the best of this one and the best of that one. Let's mitigate these shadow sides like power dynamics. And so essentially we set context in the beginning of the book, and then we walk through chapter by chapter how to really build a human-centered approach and movement in your organization. So it begins with assembling the heroes, which is building a diverse team, fundraisers, of executive leadership, of community advocates, and then the League of Heroes paradigm, which is where we really talk about the unity and the strength of diversity, all kinds of diversity, including thought diversity. I mean, this idea that being a homogenous kind of team does not serve us, right? It's short-sighted, we have blinders, and so diversity of team, unity and diversity. We then move into storytelling and how to tell stories in an ethical, empowering kind of way, honoring those who are generous enough to allow us to share those stories, but also telling the stories of all the heroes, right? Not just those who participate in our programs, because that is also inspiring. And then we move into that sticky topic of power dynamics and how to navigate them. And in each of these chapters, we present approaches, we present strategies and how-tos, and we illuminate through case studies and storytelling, through real life experiences, how to implement these, what goodness is possible, and in some cases, some of the cautionary tales of when things go wrong. So we talk about navigating power dynamics, and then we introduce the human-centered approach to fundraising. And then we begin to unpack that chapter by chapter. And then we wrap up with how to overcome resistance and how to measure impact, what should be human-centered metrics for measuring success and making certain we're on track. And then lastly, a little bit of crystal ball, some predictions for the future.
Ooh, oh, I would love to ask you about those, but people will have to get the book for that. But I don't want to take away that part of the adventure. Something really struck me as you were talking. You kept saying we. This is your book, though, alone. All right, it's not co-authored, I don't believe.
You're right. It is not co-authored.
So, but that was a conscious choice as well as an unconscious one as you were speaking. What does that reflect?
Well, first of all, I say we because this is all about unity. It's all about all of us coming together. And I also say we because I have been fortunate, so fortunate, to have collaborators, friends, thought leaders all around the world who have allowed me to pose questions and test theories and get feedback. And in fact, we had I think we had about 20 advanced reader copy folks who went through and gave feedback. And so I really do feel like while I'm officially the single author of this book, there are many voices. And you'll see throughout the chapters, there's a quote at the top of every chapter from some of those voices. There's some wonderful testimonials and endorsements along the way. But, you know, some of those friends, particularly friends of color who have a lived experience, direct experience of racism. And I'm a cisgendered white woman, and I acknowledge that in the book. Like, my view is I've had this white privilege and that I've not earned. And so being in community through the process of writing this book, I've had to challenge myself and my own beliefs through my lived experience. And again, thankfully, I've had a community that has helped me. In fact, it was one of my friends who said, you know, I get why you like the title, Tammy, But, heroes, the word hero can be a bit triggering for communities of color or anyone who has been traditionally excluded, right? So the word hero has often created division and caused more harm than good. And so that's why part of this book and part of the messaging, actually in the introduction, I issue a challenge, kind of a rally cry for us to take back the word hero, right? I mean, Jay, I think we're probably in kind of the same generation. And I remember as a little girl watching the TV series Wonder Woman.
Sure.
Yeah. And so Linda Carter, by day, was this very modest government worker. But of course, her alter ego was Wonder Woman. And she had the lasso of truth. And she had the cuffs that could deflect the wrist cuffs that could deflect bullets. And you know what she was? She was rooted in courageousness and selflessness and humility, but integrity and a sense of fairness. And all of that combined was inspiration. And to me, that is what a hero is, whether Wonder Woman was your thing or whether it was Black Panther or Green Hornet, whoever it was something good. And so I say, let's take back the word hero and push back on the unintended consequences, the unintended white saviorism that it has come to represent. So let's take it back. Let's own it. Let's say everyone can be a hero. And I know and I acknowledge some people don't want to be a hero, but that doesn't mean that they aren't in someone's eyes.
I have to ask you another thing that we've never discussed together, and you kind of alluded to it in a sense a moment ago. That this book, it sounds like you might have not written this book in this way if this were 20 years ago. Has this also been a personal evolution for you as a professional, as an author, as a person?
Absolutely, it has. I mean, I feel like I've always been, even as a little girl, very rooted in, what is right, what is goodness. But obviously, as we've evolved and as we've seen so many tragic events, and I'll lift up, the murder of George Floyd and so many tragic uh, murders and injustices rooted in race or rooted in, gender identity. I mean, there's just been so many horrible stories. It breaks my heart. And at the same time, I'm completely outraged by it. And so, yes, I've got like shelves dedicated to trying to understand and learn from people who have had these experiences and who are experts in this. And thankfully, they've also been really open to conversations. It's my job to educate myself, but I also feel compelled to test what my understanding from that reading and that learning is. And I have found that when people understand that your intentions are good and you come in full transparency and in good faith, that they just embrace and will be wonderful guides. So yes, it's absolutely been a journey. And I continue. I say, even in the book, and I say here to all of your listeners, I'm still learning. I do not have all the answers, but I want to help find them in community with others.
And you are hosting these kinds of conversations, not just through this book, which will facilitate that for others, but you've been doing that through your podcast. You've been doing it, of course, through Institute for Charitable Giving, which now you are the head of the institute,
Yes.
and that's always had as a feature, at least in its live format, park benching. So not just lecturing to people, but having conversations with people who are on their own journeys. So conversation seems like a thread here through all of this. And I'm wondering, without giving away maybe what's in the last part of the book, what you imagine are some of the conversations that both this book, but also you'd like to see the field engage in so that we can be better at what we do for the organizations that we care so much about. Do you have
Mm.
like that one piece of advice that gets people's appetite ready for the book, but also gives them something to walk away with to say, this is the kind of conversation we need to be having and why it's so important now?
Mm, that's a big question, Jay. I think that ultimately it all boils down to transparent, um, open-hearted, human-centered conversation, communication. And I think that when we come in good faith with open hearts and open minds and are committed to deep listening, which those are the ingredients of effective communication, we can all learn something about one another's lived experiences and points of view. And when we can contribute those insights to create something together, right? When we can create unity, that is when we can really move the needle on some of these big issues. I often say that the issues that we are facing are bigger than any single hero. So donors and their generosity does not have the answer. Communities and their lived experience and wisdom doesn't have the answer. Executives and staff, like with all of the expertise, they don't have the answer. It is truly when we come together and share our wisdom and our insights that we can create something powerful in unity that moves us forward to the next iteration, the next big breakthrough in our community's challenges.
Thank you for all this, Tammy. If people want to go ahead and get on a list to learn more about the book as it comes out, but also to follow your podcast, how can they do those things?
Yes, thank you, Jay. So we have a website for the book. It's called callingallheroesbook.com. You can pre-order on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, or even Books A Million, like really wherever you buy your books online. So you can check it out there and follow along, sign up for updates on our website. And then the Intentional Fundraiser podcast is available on all the typical platforms. So the Intentional Fundraiser. And of course, you can just follow me on LinkedIn. We're continually sharing updates and little snippets about all of those things.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Really appreciate it.
It's always a joy to be with you, Jay. Thank you for having me.
Once again, thanks to today's guests, Zoe and Tammy. Really a pleasure to have them share about these topics. Coming up in the Philanthropy Mastermind series, Thursday, August 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern, we have How to Raise, our weekly CFRE accredited show. And that will return with Brian Gawar of Johnson Grossnickel and Associates on the 4 types of giving and how donor psychology and smart nudges can move supporters towards deeper engagement and greater joy in giving. It'll be a great session and very practical and terrific for those who are gathering up those CFRE credits as well. On Friday, we have the PM podcast returning with a featured interview with Dr. Abraham George, founder of Shanti Journey, from Army officer to finance executive to philanthropist, and how he has worked with so many to transform lives across India. Then on Thursday, September 4th, How to Raise continues with Ellen Bristol and Dr. Courtney Ladislaw, on understanding your campaign readiness. And of course, the latest news and views will be right here on Frontlines of Social Good every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, with always a lot of surprise guests talking about what is topical and framing it around the needs that you have in your offices and in your life. You can check out past programs anytime at DonorSearch.net, the home of our longtime sponsor, DonorSearch, the global leader in AI-powered fundraising intelligence solutions. Until next time, take care and do good.